The red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror, shattering the quiet rhythm of Marcus Thompson's drive home. It was a scene he knew all too well, one that had played out countless times before, not just for him, but for millions who shared his skin color. Each stop carried its own weight. The fear of what might happen, the frustration of being judged not by actions but by appearance, the quiet resolve to make it through unscathed. Tonight, though, felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged, with an unspoken tension that went beyond routine harassment. As Marcus pulled over under the pale glow of a street lamp, memories surfaced, humiliating encounters etched into his mind like scars. But alongside those memories came something else, a deep-seated determination forged from years of resilience. He glanced at the glove compartment where his FBI badge lay hidden, a symbol of how far he'd come despite the odds stacked against him. Yet, even as he prepared to face whatever came next, Marcus couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this moment would test more than just his patience. It would challenge everything he stood for. Little did he know, the events about to unfold would leave an indelible mark on both his life and the system designed to oppress him. The car hummed softly as Marcus Thompson drove down the quiet, empty road. The Midwest night stretched endlessly around him, a blanket of darkness dotted with distant stars. It had been a long day training new recruits at the FBI Academy, and his thoughts lingered on their eager faces. So full of hope, so hungry to make a difference. He smiled faintly at the memory, but couldn't shake the weariness settling into his bones. For a moment, everything felt calm. Then it happened. Flashing red and blue lights pierced the darkness behind him. His heart sank before he even glanced in the rearview mirror. He hadn't sped. He hadn't swerved. Yet here they were again. The flashing lights, the inevitable pullover, the gnawing dread that came with being black in America. Marcus took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel tighter. He could already picture them. 2 officers approaching his car, hands hovering near their holsters, eyes scanning him like predators sizing up prey. He'd seen it all before, countless times growing up, countless times since becoming an agent. Each stop chipped away at something inside him, some small part of his dignity or safety or peace of mind. But tonight wasn't going to break him. Not this time. He pulled over smoothly, parking under the dim glow of a street lamp. As he rolled down his window, the cool night air rushed in, carrying with it the weight of what was about to unfold. Sure, enough. Footsteps crunched against gravel behind him. 2 figures emerged from the patrol car, one taller, broader, exuding arrogance, the other shorter, wiry, but no less hostile. Their flashlights cut through the dark, blinding him momentarily. "License and registration," one of them barked, his voice sharp and dismissive. Officer Grayson, judging by the nameplate glinting on his chest. Marcus forced himself to stay calm. "Of course," he said evenly, reaching slowly for his wallet. Every movement deliberate, every gesture calculated to avoid provoking suspicion. Still, he felt their eyes boring into him, scrutinizing every detail. The leather jacket, the casual jeans, the way he carried himself. They weren't just looking at him. They were judging him, reducing him to stereotypes they'd likely never questioned. "This is your car?" the second officer asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Officer Miller, if Marcus remembered correctly. Younger than Grayson, but equally emboldened by the uniform and the badge. "Yes," Marcus replied simply, handing over his license and registration. His fingers brushed against theirs briefly, and he saw the flicker of disdain in their expressions. It stung, though he'd learned to expect it. These men didn't see him as an accomplished FBI agent. To them, he was just another person like you. Grayson leaned closer, the flashlight beam still trained on Marcus's face. "You know why we pulled you over?" "No, sir, I don't." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his jaw tightened. Almost imperceptibly. He knew better than to argue. Arguing only made things worse. Well, maybe you should slow down next time, Grayson sneered, tossing the papers onto the dashboard without bothering to look at them. People like you tend to get careless when they think no one's watching. Marcus swallowed hard, biting back the retort that rose in his throat. People like you. The words echoed in his mind, dredging up memories he'd rather forget. Memories of being 16, walking home from basketball practice, stopped by a cop, who accused him of stealing a bike he'd owned for years. Memories of college, sitting in a coffee shop, asked to leave because someone thought he didn't belong there. Memories of promotions passed over, opportunities denied, not because he wasn't qualified, but because of the color of his skin. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was staying composed, keeping control. He reminded himself of how far he'd come, of the sacrifices he'd made to rise above the prejudice that sought to hold him down. He thought of his parents who worked double shifts to give him a chance at a better life. He thought of the mentors who believed in him when others doubted. And most of all, he thought of the young recruits waiting to follow in his footsteps. If he let these men win, if he let their hatred break him, it would be a betrayal of everything he stood for. I'll keep that in mind, Marcus said finally, his tone polite but firm. Is there anything else I can assist you with, officer? Grayson smirked, clearly enjoying the power dynamic. Nah, I think we're good, for now. He tapped the roof of the car hard enough to startle. Just remember, people like you need to watch themselves. As the officers returned to their patrol car, Marcus sat motionless, staring ahead into the darkness. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but so did resolve. In the glove compartment lay his FBI badge, a symbol of authority, of achievement, of everything he'd fought for. But pulling it out wouldn't change their minds. It wouldn't erase the bias ingrained in their worldview. All it would do is prove their point, that his worth was tied to a title, not to who he was as a person. No, he decided, tonight he wouldn't rely on a badge to validate him. Tonight he would stand firm, knowing he deserved respect regardless of what they thought. And as the patrol car drove off into the night, leaving him alone under the pale light of the street lamp, Marcus allowed himself a small, defiant smile. This wasn't over, not yet. But he was ready. Ready to face whatever came next, ready to reclaim his identity, ready to show the world that resilience could shine even in the darkest moments. The headlights of the patrol car cast long, distorted shadows across Marcus's windshield as officers Grayson and Miller approached. Their steps were deliberate, heavy, each one a reminder of the power they wielded. Grayson led the way, his smirk widening as he leaned down to peer into the car. His flashlight beam blinded Marcus momentarily, but it was the man's tone that cut deeper. License and registration, Grayson barked, his voice dripping with condescension. Beside him, Miller hovered, arms crossed, his posture radiating hostility. Marcus nodded calmly, reaching slowly for his wallet. Of course. His movements were measured, careful, not wanting to give them any reason to escalate further. But inside, his pulse quickened. He could feel their eyes on him, scrutinizing every detail, judging him before he'd even spoken a word. The tension coiled in his chest like a spring, tightening with each passing second. As he handed over the documents, Grayson barely glanced at them, instead letting out a low chuckle. "You sure this is your car?" he asked, sarcasm lacing his words. "Looks kind of fancy for someone like you." The phrase hung there, sharp and biting. Someone like you. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a dismissal, a reduction of Marcus to nothing more than a stereotype. Memories flooded back unbidden. Memories of being 16, standing on a sidewalk while a cop rifled through his backpack, accusing him of shoplifting something he hadn't touched. Memories of college, sitting in a quiet library, only to be interrupted by security questioning why he was there. Each memory carried its own weight, its own sting, chipping away at his sense of dignity bit by bit. But those memories also carried lessons. Lessons about resilience, about refusing to let others define who he was. Growing up, Marcus had promised himself he wouldn't let these moments break him. Instead, he'd use them as fuel, to work harder, to prove wrong to everyone who doubted him. And now, staring at these two men bathed in red and blue light, he clung to that promise. Grayson wasn't done yet. "You know why we pulled you over?" he demanded, leaning closer, his breath hot against the cold night air. When Marcus shook his head, the officer sneered. "Speeding, tailgating, reckless driving, take your pick." "I wasn't speeding," Marcus replied evenly, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've been driving safely all evening." "Oh, so you're calling us liars now?" Grayson shot back, his voice rising. "That's cute, real cute," Miller chimed in, snickering. "Yeah, maybe you think you're better than us, huh? Is that it?" Marcus swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay composed. He knew what they were doing, trying to provoke him, trying to make him lose control. But beneath the surface, emotions churned. Anger burned bright and hot. Frustration gnawed at the edges of his patience, and fear whispered insidious doubts. Fear that if he said the wrong thing, if he made one misstep, things could spiral out of control. Fear that no matter how much he'd achieved, how many lives he'd saved as an FBI agent, none of it would matter here. Not to them. His mind raced, grappling with conflicting instincts. Should he pull out his badge? Show them who he really was? Or would that only validate their attempts to intimidate him? Would it undermine everything he stood for, his determination to be respected not because of a title, but because of who he was? "You hear me, buddy?" Grayson snapped, slamming his hand hard onto the roof of the car. The sound reverberated through the night, startling Marcus despite his efforts to remain calm. "Answer me when I'm talking to you." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The noise echoed in Marcus's ears, louder than the hum of the engine, louder than the distant chirping of crickets. In that split second, he felt the full weight of systemic oppression bearing down on him. The years of bias, the dismissals, the assumptions. It was overwhelming, suffocating. Yet somehow, amidst the chaos, clarity began to emerge. He thought of his training, of the countless hours spent honing his skills, preparing for situations exactly like this. He thought of the young recruits he mentored, watching him to see how to navigate a world that often refused to see them. He thought of his parents, who taught him to stand tall even when the odds were stacked against him. Slowly, Marcus took a deep breath, steadying himself. The fear didn't vanish, it never fully did, but it no longer controlled him. This wasn't just about surviving the night anymore, it was about proving, to himself as much as to them, that he deserved respect, that he was more than the labels they tried to slap on him. As Grayson continued shouting accusations, Marcus's resolve hardened. He wasn't going to shrink away. He wasn't going to let them win. Whatever happened next, he would face it head-on, with courage, with dignity, and with the unwavering belief that change was possible. Even in the darkest moments, seeds of resistance could take root, and sometimes those seeds grew into something extraordinary. The tension in the air was palpable as Marcus reached toward his glove compartment. The movement was slow, deliberate, but to Officers Grayson and Miller, it might as well have been a gunshot. Their hands flew to their holsters, fingers hovering over triggers, eyes wide with panic. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The world narrowed to the sound of their labored breathing, the faint hum of the patrol car's engine, and the metallic click of Marcus's glove compartment opening. Marcus felt their fear radiating like heat waves off asphalt. He understood it, knew exactly what they were imagining. Danger, violence, chaos. But none of that existed here. Not tonight. Slowly, almost ceremoniously, he pulled out his FBI badge, holding it up between them. The gold shield gleamed under, the dim streetlight catching the officer's gaze. Their faces changed instantly. Arrogance melted into shock, then hardened into panic. Grayson stumbled back a step, his earlier bravado crumbling like sandcastles against an incoming tide. Miller froze, mouth agape, his hand still resting on his gun. Neither said a word, not immediately. Instead, silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, forcing them to confront the gravity of what had just transpired. I didn't know," Grayson stammered finally, his voice trembling. "We thought—" "You thought wrong," Marcus interrupted, his tone calm but firm. There was no anger in his voice, only authority. It was enough to silence Grayson mid-sentence, leaving him fumbling for words. Miller chimed in next, his apology rushed and desperate. "Sir, we were just doing our job. We didn't mean any disrespect." Marcus let the silence linger again, letting their excuses hang in the air like smoke after a fire. He didn't need to say anything. They already knew. This wasn't about one mistake. It was about years of assumptions, biases, and systemic failures that allowed moments like this to happen. Every dismissive comment, every false accusation, every condescending smirk, it all came rushing back to them now, reflected in Marcus's unwavering stare. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. "Your badge numbers," he said simply, extending a hand. "I'll need them both." Grayson hesitated, glancing at Miller as if searching for guidance. When none came, he reluctantly rattled off his number, followed by Miller. Marcus jotted them down on a small notepad, his pen moving with precision. "This incident will be reported to your superiors," he continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And I expect accountability." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier bravado replaced by visible humiliation. They shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, unable to meet the weight of Marcus's presence. In that moment, the power dynamic flipped completely. These men, who had once loomed over him with weapons drawn, now cowered under the authority of someone they'd dismissed moments before. But this wasn't just about these two officers, or even about Marcus himself. As he stood there, badge in hand, he realized the significance of what had happened. This wasn't merely a personal victory, it was a challenge to the very system that enabled prejudice to thrive. By refusing to back down, by asserting his worth, without cruelty or vengeance, Marcus sent a message loud and clear. Systemic racism could be confronted and dismantled, one act of resilience at a time. Just as the officers began stuttering more apologies, headlights pierced the darkness in the distance. A second patrol car approached, its tires crunching against gravel. Tension surged anew. Would the reinforcements side with their colleagues? Would they try to justify what had happened, doubling down on the bias that started it all? Or would they see the truth, the absurdity of profiling a man based solely on the color of his skin? Marcus straightened, his grip tightening slightly around the badge. Whatever came next, he was ready. As the headlights grew closer, Marcus felt the tension rise again. Another patrol car pulled up behind the first, its engine idling in the quiet night. Two more officers stepped out, their expressions wary as they took in the scene. Grayson and Miller stood awkwardly to the side, still visibly shaken from the confrontation with Marcus. The new arrivals approached cautiously, hands resting on their holsters but not yet drawn. Marcus remained calm, his posture relaxed but commanding. He greeted them with a nod, his voice steady and professional. "Officers," he began, holding up his FBI badge for clarity. "There's been an incident here tonight that needs addressing." He explained the situation succinctly. The unwarranted stop, the false accusations, the escalation fueled by prejudice. His tone was measured, devoid of anger or vindictiveness, yet it carried an undeniable weight. As he spoke, the new officers exchanged glances, their initial skepticism giving way to understanding. They listened intently, their body language shifting from defensive to respectful. Grayson and Miller fidgeted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado replaced by shame. When Marcus finished speaking, one of the newcomers turned to them, his expression stern. "We'll handle this properly," he said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Marcus nodded once, satisfied. Without another word, he returned to his car, leaving the group of officers to process what had just unfolded. Back at home, Marcus sat alone in the dim glow of his living room lamp, replaying the night's events in his mind. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that settled deep in his chest. He leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes as fragments of the encounter replayed like scenes from a movie. The flash of red and blue lights, the condescending smirks, the sound of Grayson's hand slamming on his car roof. Each memory carried its own sting, reigniting the anger and frustration he'd worked so hard to suppress. But there was something else, too. A quiet sense of triumph. Despite everything, he'd stood firm. He hadn't let their prejudice break him. Instead, he'd used the moment to assert his worth, to hold them accountable, to remind himself that dignity wasn't something they could take away. That realization brought a small measure of peace, though it didn't erase the emotional toll. He knew nights like this would stay with him forever, etched into his memory like scars. But tonight, he chose to focus on the victory, the fact that he'd faced injustice head-on and emerged stronger. The next morning, news of the incident spread quickly through the local police department. Internal Affairs launched an investigation, scrutinizing not only Grayson and Miller's actions, but also the broader culture of racial profiling within the force. Witnesses came forward, community members who had endured similar treatment, and their testimonies painted a damning picture of systemic bias. Grayson and Miller faced disciplinary action, their behavior serving as a stark reminder that accountability matters. Word of Marcus's intervention reached colleagues and civilians alike, sparking conversations about reform. People began demanding change, not just within law enforcement but across society. Anti-discrimination training programs were implemented, and discussions about racial equity gained momentum. For Marcus, seeing these ripple effects was both gratifying and humbling. He realized that standing up for himself hadn't just been a personal act of defiance. It had ignited a larger movement toward justice, and that gave him hope. Inspired by the impact of that single night, Marcus threw himself into advocacy work. He attended conferences, delivering powerful speeches about resilience and authenticity in the face of prejudice. He wrote articles detailing his experiences, urging others to challenge systemic racism wherever they encountered it. He collaborated with leaders in law enforcement, pushing for policies that prioritized diversity and inclusion. His message resonated deeply, especially among young people. Students, activists, and aspiring officers reached out to thank him for sharing his story. Many told him how his courage inspired them to speak out against injustice in their own lives. Marcus found purpose in these interactions, knowing that his efforts were creating ripples far beyond what he could have imagined. Months later, Marcus stood before a group of young minority recruits at the FBI Academy. Their faces were eager, hopeful, yet tinged with uncertainty, much like his own had been years ago. He shared his story openly, recounting the challenges he'd faced and the lessons he'd learned along the way. Self-worth isn't something anyone can give you or take away, he told them, his voice filled with conviction. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone define you. Use your voice, stand tall, and never forget why you're here, to make a difference. His words hung in the air, igniting sparks of determination in the eyes of those listening. For many, Marcus became more than a mentor. He became a symbol of possibility, a living testament to the power of resilience. Reflecting on his journey, Marcus marveled at how far he'd come. From the teenage boy stopped unjustly on a sidewalk to the accomplished agent challenging systemic racism, his life had been shaped by moments of struggle and triumph. Each experience had taught him something valuable: the importance of perseverance, the strength found in vulnerability, the transformative power of standing up for what's right. He knew racism wouldn't disappear overnight. It was too deeply entrenched, too pervasive. But he also knew that individual actions mattered. Every time someone refused to be diminished, every time someone demanded accountability, cracks formed in the walls of oppression. Those cracks might seem small, but together they could bring entire systems crashing down. As the story drew to a close, Marcus's journey served as a powerful reminder. While racism persists, so does the human spirit. His story wasn't just about overcoming prejudice. It was about inspiring others to do the same. It was a call to action, urging readers to confront injustice in their own lives and communities. The final note was one of hope. Marcus had proven that resilience and courage could pave the way for a brighter future. And if one person could make such a difference, then perhaps everyone could. Perhaps, together, they could create a world where respect and equality weren't aspirations, but realities. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others who might find inspiration in its message of resilience and justice. Your support helps amplify voices that challenge prejudice and advocate for change. For more powerful narratives like this one, subscribe to our platform or follow us on social media. Together, we can continue to shine a light on stories that matter, spark meaningful conversations, and inspire action toward a more equitable future. Let's stand united against injustice, one story at a time. Share, subscribe, and be part of the movement for change. Thank you for reading.